There has been a great deal of talk this year about the right of every voter to cast their ballot during the 2020 presidential campaign.
But that right did not come easily for all. During the 1920 presidential election, a group of black Floridians went to the polls. Some were turned away, and that led to a night of violence. Tonight, Rod Carter reports on a dark chapter of Central Florida's political past that still holds a message for voters today.
Nestled at the end of a cul-de-sac in a small Orange County neighborhood is this lasting tribute to honor the memory of African Americans who once called Ocoee their home. That is until the 1920 presidential election, when things took a deadly turn. But the story of the Ocoee Massacre is far more complex than just that. If you visit the small town of Ocoee just outside Orlando, you'll be impressed by its quaint southern charm with beautiful Stark Lake near the city center. But the city holds a tumultuous past that not many people may know about, and it all centers around politics.
They had cried so much they would laugh at some of the stuff that happened. The pain was just that great, Father.
St. Petersburg resident J. Carl Devine knows the horrible history of Ocoee firsthand. His grandparents lived it.
My grandfather was a AME minister, and they had a church in Ocoee, Florida. And he worked for a guy named July Perry.
July Perry, a central figure in what's now known as the Ocoee Massacre. On November 2nd, 1920, Perry's friend Moses Norman, a black man, went to vote but was turned away. Both Perry and Norman had encouraged other blacks and women to vote in the 1920 presidential election, with Republican Warren G. Harding up against Democrat James Cox. At the time, the Republican Party was the party of choice for blacks.
When they wanted to vote, the white folks didn't want them to vote because they were voting Republican, and they were going to take their jobs. The whole 9 yards that we hear today, they heard in 1920.
The details of that night, now on display at the Orange County Regional History Center, shows a group of armed white men went to July Perry's home and violence ensued. Chief Curator Pam Schwartz.
July Perry's wife and daughter are taken to the jail in Tampa. July Perry is picked up and brought to the jail in Orlando. At some point, a lynch mob takes him from the jail, brutalizes him, and at the end of the night, he's lynched, he's hanged from a tree, and is murdered.
And then it got worse. 24 black homes, all burned. Other parts of the black community destroyed as well. People were running out of town just to stay alive. And at the end of the night, 2 white men were dead and at least 4 blacks were killed. But it's believed that number is far higher.
As historians, given the current research, the History Center, we say at least 4 black individuals were killed. That's July Perry, who was lynched, as well as 3 other black individuals who were burned to death.
But the Ocoee Massacre wasn't just about the right to vote.
So they're buying properties, and thus the prosperity begins in the community.
It was about land and wealth among blacks. After the massacre, this advertisement went out saying, "Land for sale, special bargain, belonging to the Negroes that just left Ocoee."
Over several years, there is an ongoing series of land sales. The land was not just sort of snapped up by the white community and the black people fled. The black community did try to fight and keep their land, or to get fair prices, or to continue living there. But there's ongoing terror. Up until the next year, there's dynamite being thrown into black people's homes. There's individuals being taken out and beaten and warned that they've been talking a little too much about what happened in Ocoee last November.
And to a great extent, it worked. J. Carl Devine's grandmother, Roxy Williams, is among those listed on the properties lost. He is hoping people never forget what was taken from his family, and that this continues to serve as a deadly example of the power of the right to vote. When you hear those kinds of stories, and then you hear people say, "I don't vote,"
it's disheartening because of so many people have died for the right to vote.
So interestingly enough, of the 800 or so registered voters in Ocoee in 1920, about 114 cast their ballots. 27 of them were black. Things started going bad when the first black voter was turned away, and that was about 8 o'clock, or 11 o'clock, I should say, that morning. By the way, the black population of Ocoee has remained extremely small since that massacre, and the area became known as something called a sundown town, and that meant that blacks who didn't live there were not allowed in the town after the sun went down. That was just taken off the books 2 years ago after Senator Randolph Bracey from the Orlando area sponsored a bill to bring recognition and then have the story of the massacre taught in schools. A bill for reparations that was also introduced for the families. Well, that died.
You and I are both native Floridians,
Right.
and we were talking as you were doing this story about how much we've learned about this sort of untold history.
It's fascinating. So I'd heard about it as a child, but never really knew the full story. And I don't know if you probably noticed in the background of that exhibit during the interview, there was a lot of yellow on the wall and a few white words. So all of the yellow, I'm told from the curator, is what people thought about what happened. All of the white is what they could confirm. So the wall was as big as this.
Yeah.
But it only filled about 2 to 3 paragraphs when you narrowed it down to what they could confirm, because some stuff was not written down, it wasn't a record kept, and
Retold
people
and retold.
just did not want to talk about it.
How long is that exhibit there?
It is up until next February, I think February 14th, so there's plenty of time to get over there. Give yourself some time, though, because it starts as the first Africans arrive in the state of Florida and then goes all the way up through the Black Lives Matter movement and all in between. So it's a very interesting exhibit.
Okay.
Thank you, Rod.
Thank you.